He did not share their energy or what looked like expressions of hope on their faces. His mind stuck on the depressing thought of applying for jobs that did not interest him. Jim had not considered all of the costly ink, paper, envelopes, and stamps used every time he had to mail out his resume, and many of the job descriptions given to him contained at least a few lines that made him feel unqualified. He didn't dare mention to Jim that he didn't really want most of the jobs he applied for. He had to get a job, and he didn't want them to think he had a bad attitude, but he generally hated the job search, finding it a great source of depression, and the interview process only triggered anxiety and awkwardness. His self-absorbed outlook prevented him from appreciating the early spring daffodils blooming on the campus sidewalks. When he arrived at his car, he sighed, opened the driver's side door, dropped the printouts on the passenger seat, and plopped himself down in the driver's seat. What was the point of going to school all these years when I still have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing with my life? I need to see a psychotherapist. In this scene, we see Zander coming out of the career counselor's office, and he's unable to appreciate just the basic things in life, like seeing the flowers blooming at the beginning of spring. He doesn't share the optimism of the college students he sees on campus walking around. And part of the problem is he's trying to pretend everything that's happening is normal, especially with the career counselor. He's not allowed to complain about the process or that he feels unprepared for any kind of career. He's just supposed to keep applying for jobs that he's not interested in while pretending to be interested in what he's doing, because if he complains about it, then he'll be seen as just having a bad attitude about the whole situation. So he never lets on to the career counselor how he really feels about this whole process, and he doesn't feel like he has really any guidance from the career counselor other than just keep applying for jobs. And the university just hasn't prepared him for a career. They just expect him to somehow fit his skills or his education into some type of career out there, some nameless career. And so because he doesn't have anybody to talk to about it, or explain it to him, or somebody that will listen, and he doesn't understand why he feels depressed and anxious, that's why he feels like he needs to talk to somebody like a psychotherapist. Dr. Golden is a good therapist, and he works by acting as kind of a mirror to Zander. And many times the way that he works is to help expand Zander's outlook beyond just himself, his narrow focus on himself and his problems, widening it to include other people that are also struggling in the same way that Zander is. And he's often reminding Zander that he's not alone. And his role really is to help Zander continue to persevere, but at the same time helping him understand the emotions he's having are, in a sense, normal. And the thing is that Dr. Golden also understands that at this point, Zander has said things like that he doesn't want to exist anymore, and that so part of his therapy then will be to help Zander deal with this kind of suicidal ideation that he has. Anything in particular you want to talk about today? Dr. Golden asked. Well, sometimes I wish I could just take a pill and disappear. Dr. Golden shifted in his chair. Can you expand on that? I don't know. It's hard to live without a sense of purpose or direction. The job search is just going through the motions, and it depresses me. Most of the people I knew in college got practical degrees. Some of them had jobs lined up before they even graduated. After I finished my undergrad degree, I spent the next 2 years bagging groceries. Tell me more about that. I ran into a guy from school who asked what I was doing there and how it must suck to be bagging groceries after college. I told him it was just temporary and that I was looking for a job elsewhere. Instead, I ended up enrolling in grad school. Okay, let's go back a little. You mentioned wanting to take a pill that would make you disappear. Are you referring to a way to end your life? I do have those kinds of thoughts. But you don't have a plan to act on them, right? No, not really, he said, his fingers joined across his stomach while he lightly rubbed the tips of his thumbs together. I don't know why I feel this way. Nobody should have to feel like this. I assume there's something wrong with me, or else I'm being punished for something I did in the past. I remember working a temp job delivering copy machines, and we had to be at the job at 5 in the morning. The truck driver I worked with said he felt like he was being punished. I guess I'm not the only one who feels that way. Dr. Golden wrote down a few notes and swiveled slightly in his chair, waiting silently to see if Zander had more to share before speaking. Well, it's not uncommon for people to dislike their jobs, and I think how a person frames their experience can affect whether or not it feels like punishment, as you're calling it. Some of my patients fear leaving the house or talking on the phone, but I don't think you're quite on that level. I do feel that you can be a little bit too hard on yourself. There's a hidden anger beneath your anxiety, and it's a danger when it's turned inward. Hopefully, with Dr. Steinbrenner's therapy and our sessions together, we can closely monitor your feelings. He clicked his pen before finishing his response. Just keeping things in perspective can help. I've had patients throw things at me, so you're not alone in feeling frustrated. Should I start throwing things at you? Dr. Golden chuckled. No, I wouldn't want to encourage that, but it's important to know that you're not alone with these emotions. Everyone experiences anger, but we don't have to be controlled by it. Yes, the humor in the psychotherapy sessions is simply a part of their natural relationship that they have. And I think there is humor that runs throughout the novel that is sometimes subtle like that, but also just seemed to come through naturally as I was writing. So it wasn't like I wasn't trying to force humor into the novel. It just happened naturally. It just shows that in Zander's relationship with his psychotherapist that it's not all 100% serious despite how he feels. Zander never really loses his sense of humor. Zander's struggle is because university life didn't prepare him for any kind of career. It gave him an education, but never prepared him to put that education to use in the working world. And so, of course, he's going to struggle because the only guidance he has are these little meetings with the career counselor where they just tell him to keep sending resumes. But there's never any real guidance as to how to make his skills or his education fit into the working world in a way that is meaningful And that's why it's as if applying for these jobs is just this meaningless task that depresses him. And it's because he doesn't have any real interest in the jobs he's applying for, because he doesn't see how they connect to his education or his interests. Sanders mentioning the delivery truck driver has to do with his looking for anyone that he can relate to that's going through a similar struggle. And the delivery truck driver that he's helping mentions how he feels punished. And Zander can relate to that feeling. He also feels punished just for having spent all his time in school, getting an education, all the way up to a master's degree, and still finding that what he's learned doesn't translate into the working world or into any kind of meaningful career. While Zander is anxious and depressed, he's also angry. And this is something that Dr. Golden senses in him that differentiates him a little more from some of his other patients, where he recognizes that the anger is a real concern, that it's something he has to help Zander with, because he's also aware of the suicidal ideation that Zander has, and that if that anger turns inward, that it becomes dangerous. Dr. Golden, that's why Dr. Golden spends so much of his effort in trying to dissolve some of that anger by reassuring Zander that, again, that it's not just him that's struggling. Dr. Golden wants to take the focus off of all of these things that are making Zander angry and honoring the emotions that Zander is going through as well, not trying to deny or suppress them, but at the same time encouraging Zander to, continue on and not identify so much with whether he has, the most successful career or any career really, but seeing himself as more than just a career, realizing the other parts of himself that make him human. I do think Dr. Golden is successful in helping Zander, especially with the suicidal ideation. Zander doesn't follow through on his desire to no longer exist, and all of the frustration he feels and having to play this game that he really doesn't want to participate in. I guess it depends on how you define success. Was he successful in keeping Zander alive? Yes. Even though, yes, there's a little bit of progress as they're going along as far as Zander going from one job to the next. If you want to call that success, at least there is some progress there. Does Zander ever resist? The only real resistance that Zander has is precisely his desire to not want to continue living. But Dr. Golden would not be a good psychotherapist if he simply agreed with Zander that, yes, you shouldn't exist. So that's the only real issue that Dr. Golden is not going to agree with him on, because it's really his job to help Zander navigate these difficult emotions and maybe not so much cure Zander, because that's really, he can't cure Zander of his depression or his anxiety, but he can be there to help Zander keep going, and that's worth something. The reason they're psychotherapy sessions aren't more confrontational is because Zander himself understands the process of psychotherapy and thinks more like a psychotherapist himself. And he's not there to necessarily be fixed. He just wants someone to listen and understand his emotions, where outside of these psychotherapy sessions, he's not allowed to vent or complain because, as I mentioned before, it's just seen as him having a bad attitude or making excuses. It's only in these psychotherapy sessions that he's allowed to express these kinds of feelings and thoughts. And you could contrast Zander with somebody like Percy, who would go into these therapy sessions. It would probably start an argument with the therapist to try to win an argument, because he doesn't really understand the psychotherapeutic process. He just simply expects the therapist to fix or cure the patient. And so somebody like Percy just sees therapy as a waste of time, where the patient is simply throwing away their money to somebody who's collecting a paycheck. He doesn't really see it as anything more than that, and just kind of sees it as a waste of time. So somebody like Percy, because he doesn't understand the psychotherapeutic process, he's the type of person who's never going to benefit from seeing a psychotherapist in the first place. I don't see Dr. Golden as part of the problem with the inhumanity of the healthcare system. Even though he technically works within that system, he understands the need for mental well-being. So no, I don't see him as part of the problem the way that Percy might. I doubt many people would sympathize with my attitude. They'd say I chose this path for my life, and that if I really wanted to be successful, I could, because, after all, we live in America. They'd argue that I'm choosing not to contribute when I should be. What they don't see is how our society is organized to make it nearly impossible for introverted people like myself to serve in a meaningful way. I get the feeling society wants to force all introverts to be extroverts. I apologize for using the word society. It's such a vague word, and it sounds like a cop-out. How would you define society? Dr. Golden asked. Increasingly inhumane. It begrudgingly pays for the crimes it commits, but it never seems to learn from the consequences, always inventing new ways to dehumanize people in the name of progress. Again, I think this is just Zander trying to cover his bases, because typically outside of these psychotherapy sessions, he's not allowed to complain about his circumstances or about the education he's received, or how the system really doesn't work for him. And then he's also apologizing for using vague words like society simply because he doesn't know who to blame. But again, he's simply saying, I'm criticizing society, but I don't expect anyone to sympathize with me, because he's already conditioned to not complain about the system he's trying to live in, or acknowledging that maybe the system he's living in is broken, because to do that is just to have a bad attitude, or to be making excuses for his not being more successful in life, and not understanding why he spent all those years in the university getting an education, and then to be dumped out into the world with no real understanding of how, what he's supposed to do with that education. Many people I know are frustrated with today's political landscape, yet they are generally successful in their careers. It's interesting to note that despite their career success, they don't seem to find much more peace or happiness. Some of them should be in therapy, but are not. I see this too often with some of my medical students. They're trying to learn how to treat patients for psychological illness, yet they have no time to attend to their own mental health. I don't think it's coincidental that people that go into the profession of psychotherapy would not have time to attend to their own mental well-being, because that's part of the inhumanity of the entire healthcare system, in which somebody is simply studying a topic so that they can fix the patient again, and maybe it doesn't even occur to them that they should attend to their own mental well-being, perhaps before they ever attempt this kind of profession. And that might be the one argument where Percy might be right on that, because he does see it as kind of, these psychotherapists who can't even fix themselves. Why would we expect them to be able to fix people that are struggling with mental illness? But again, Dr. Golden recognizes this as a problem. So that's why I'm saying Dr. Golden is not the problem. It's the system that's forcing everybody to just, productivity is number one. That's it. It's not about taking care of your own well-being. Well-being, no matter what your profession is, we don't take time to invest in our own mental wellness. The mental health care worker who doesn't attend to their own health is kind of like the doctor who smokes cigarettes. It's kind of hypocritical. And Dr. Golden is again widening Zander's perspective that even if you did find a career that paid well enough, it's not necessarily it's not going to give you meaning necessarily. It's not going to give you the fulfillment you're looking for. It might, but in most cases, as he's saying, many people have careers and are still not happy. They don't feel fulfilled. Regardless, what that does is undercuts the idea of the American dream, because really the American dream is just an illusion. And most careers are simply a way to survive, because basically you're trained and you get your career pays for your room and board. Without the career, you're not getting a paycheck anymore, which means you can't survive not in this society, unless you want to endure homelessness. And if you expect to do more than survive in this society, then you've been duped by the American dream, which doesn't exist anymore. To believe in that is to be delusional. By telling Zander this, he's reaffirming that maybe you shouldn't put so much weight into this idea of a career being the thing that's going to fulfill you. Don't identify so much with this idea that a career is going to make you happy, or that finding one is going to make you happy. Because really, careers go up and down, and they don't always last.